Welcome to another episode of Mixed Extents. My name is Mark Wilkinson. With me today, as always, are Andrew Prusky and Anthony Nocentino. Today, we're going to be talking about PowerShell in the DBA. And we've got two very special guests, which some of you in the community might know. We have Chrissy LeMaire. Chrissy is a creator of Dba Tools, dual MVP, a GitHub star, and a fan of beer and cats. Thank you for
It's
joining us,
true.
Chrissy.
Thank you so much for having me.
And then we also have Rob Sewell. He has a beard, which is obvious. Also rocking an awesome Mixed Extents t-shirt. He is also a dual MVP, a contributor to DBA Tools, and a co-organizer of the PowerShell. How do you say that? PSConf EU?
PS Call for You is
All right.
perfectly fine.
Among many other events. And both of them have co-authored a book on DBA Tools. The link I will actually edit and put right here. And it will also be in the show notes. So thanks again for joining us. Today we're just talking about PowerShell. Got a fairly easy question to kick things off here. So what initially got both of you interested in PowerShell? And that's for either of you.
I've actually never heard Rob's response to this, and I'd love to hear that.
Oh, so I'm going to go first.
Yeah.
So the first thing that I needed to do was in the age of digital photos, suddenly you've got a load of photos and they come out with stupid numbered names. And what I wanted to do was move them into directories that were ordered by year and by month. And I was like, how am I going to do this? And one of the folk that Andrew and I used to work with was in the same room, and he was a photography nut. And I said, what do you do? Do you use a program? Do you know what you do? And he said, I use PowerShell. And I'm like, what's PowerShell? And he said, here you are, here's a script, run this. So I went, here's a script, ran that. It did exactly not what I wanted. And then I started learning how to work out what to do with PowerShell. And that was at home, and that was kind of a bit of fun. But the thing that absolutely nailed it for me at work was Andrew and I's process for checking SQLation jobs, which was extraordinarily manual because that's what the boss said. And I turned it into a PowerShell script that went off and checked and color coded an Excel file and made it all beautiful. And at that point I went, ding, this thing's really cool. And it went from there.
The chap who was into photography, that was the head of the networks department, wasn't it? I was like, was it? Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Do you know what he wrote on my leaving card from that company? It was like, we will miss your unique mix of unreasonableness and hurt pride.
That
Thanks very
describes
much,
you
Rick.
well.
I think that's reasonable.
That makes more sense because I was like, wow, a photographer into PowerShell, but he was the network administrator into photography and PowerShell.
He wasn't into PowerShell at all.
Oh, he just used it for that.
He needed to do the same thing, and he'd found it. He was one of those guys that would find how to do something all the time. So yeah,
Sweet.
it was cool.
My journey goes back, so I've always loved scripting. I got on IRC in the 90s, and they had this little bot, and I wanted to be a hacker, right? They had this bot called an egg drop bot, and it was written in C, and then it used something called TCL or Tickle to do all that stuff. So I started to love scripting because I didn't like compiled languages because it's not instant, right? With DOS and stuff at the time, you could just execute a command and it would appear. But whenever you're doing that with a compiled language, then you'd have to type it up, compile it, then run it. And it kind of delayed that satisfaction. So I've always loved scripting. And I was on Unix a lot. And then on Windows, we had VB script, which was good enough. It was good enough. And I learned classic ASP. And then I went to a conference and there was a presentation there, and it turned out to be by Jeffrey Snover, the creator of PowerShell, where they were talking about a new Unix-like shell on Windows And that was 2005, and I was so excited. But I found it really hard because I was trying to like smash VB scripts and T-SQL, what I knew about that, into this other completely new thing. And so it wasn't until about 2011 that that I needed to get something done with SharePoint, and I couldn't believe how manual it was. And then there was this, they had a PowerShell snap-in at the time. It did everything that I wanted, and it also kept me excited and intrigued enough. It wasn't just a hello world. It was an ongoing project that I just kept building on. So that's how I was able to get into it.
It's funny. I didn't even think about my own story until you guys were talking there. But I've always been a developer. I love developing even compiled languages. And a friend of mine who was a network administrator sent me a script that he was using to like iterate through some objects in the Active Directory. He's like, "Hey, can you take a look at this?" It was in PowerShell. I'm like, "I don't know what the heck PowerShell is." But then I started playing with it. I'm like, "Whoa, this is cool." And that's pretty much how I got into it. That's
Were you
I-
into C# before? Is that one of the compiled languages that you were developing
so
in?
no, so I've done some work in well, I guess I've done some work in C#, C++, a very minuscule amount in C, and I think like you, I kind of prefer scripting languages. Like I'm a huge Python fan. I use Python for
Ooh,
everything.
awesome.
And PowerShell gives that like ease of development and fun
Mm-hmm.
that Python gives me. But it has all those cool like built-in modules and everything for all the stuff I do in my day-to-day job. So
Yeah.
it's been pretty cool.
So here,
I
let
think
me
that's where I want to go
sorry.
next.
Let me throw my story in because it kind of ties exactly back into what we're going to talk about today. So I was, it's a long story, but I'm going to give like the most abridged version I possibly can. I had to go shoot a training video with Jeffrey Snover and Jason Helmick on the release of PowerShell Core. And all I knew about PowerShell before that was how to copy and paste it off of the internet, right? So I had to go learn PowerShell to have a meaningful conversation and record a 5-hour training video with Jeffrey Snover and Jason Helmick, who's a PowerShell
pressure.
MVP and now program manager. No pressure at all. I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't even know who Jeffrey Snover was. I had to go Google him that night after I got the email, and I was like, "Huh, he's got a Wikipedia page. Interesting."
Awesome.
But here's where it comes back to what we're going to talk about today. I finished that training video, and then you guys come along with DBA Tools, and I brought, just like you, Chris, you described bringing these two technologies together to better yourself at what you do at work. Same thing. I'm like, all right, I'm a sole practitioner consultant. The only way I'm going to be able to scale is if I learn PowerShell and y'all drop DBA Tools at nearly the same exact time, right? And I was like, let's bring this together. And it's been head first ever since, and it enables me to do stuff at a scale that I would never be able to do as a single person. So thank you all for
Completely.
what you've done. So
Pleasure's all on this side of the table.
yeah, the
That's what I was-
timing of that was crazy. Like just how fast like all that stuff happened. Right, it was 2016, right?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, whenever it started getting real popular, and then we set up the SQL Slack, and everybody joined there, and started doing a lot of presentations across the board.
That's
So
if
about-
we're all doing stories.
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm
why
like,
not,
I want to hear yours.
So mine was, I pretty much used PowerShell as Rob. How do I do this? Andrew, run that. Okay, and that was it was pretty much that for ages. And I was working for a company where we need to set up. We were setting up a QA environment for containers for spinning up SQL Server 2012 and all this. I was automating it through PowerShell. That was the first time I'd done any proper scripting in it at all. And I have two memories of it. One of hours and hours of Googling and going, no, that's not what I want. No, that's not what I want. And then sending it off to one of the architects who's a pretty good PowerShell scripter in the company. And I was in a meeting. I just got a direct message from him. And he said, wherever you're learning this, it's very, very bad. I was like, right. Okay. And then he sat me down and actually went through, you don't do it like that. You do it like this, and sort of got me through. And then I started getting just more and more into it. And yeah, then I met Mark. We started exploring where we work together now and getting really into like fundamental things like run spaces and stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah. Pretty much based off your blog post, actually, Chrissy, of how to set up run spaces. Like, oh, thank you.
Run spaces simplified as much as possible.
Yes.
Because
it's not
it
an
was
easy
so-
concept.
I was like, oh, I'll totally be able to. Oh my God, no. Yeah, I actually referred to it just the other day because I was trying to figure out how to load my profile faster because I wanted to import a module. And I usually don't do that in my profile, but it was, it's the terminal's icon, the terminal icons module, right? But sometimes it would take just a little too long. And then PowerShell yells at you. Your profile took like, 575 milliseconds to load. And so that annoyed me. And I was like, well, maybe I can get my profile to load async. I wonder why nobody's done this before. And then I completely figured it out like 4 days later when I was like, I am abandoning this project. Nobody ever try to write some async thing. There's scoping issues. All the big brains on Twitter are like, don't do this. And I was like, but my brain's on it. And then my brain was super off of it. And so, yeah.
That run spaces blog post, I just use it all the time.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
I need to do this. Copy that, put this,
Yes.
get this code, boom, bang, and it worked. And it's just like
Copy, paste,
works.
replace.
Yep.
Awesome.
And I'm just like, next.
Yeah,
Nice.
absolutely. Yeah. Working. Thank you.
Definitely be adding that to the resources for
Oh, yeah.
the
yeah.
add a link, Mark. Ding ding ding.
Whenever you want to do
I'm not
things,
going to put it on the screen, Anthony. I will put it in
come
the
on.
show notes. though.
Right here.
See,
Now you have
Chrissy
to.
did it.
Like
Yeah,
and
now I have to.
subscribe.
Oh boy.
whenever you have to make things run faster, use Mattis's PS Profiler module,
So good.
which is so good.
So I love it.
And I've seen the next release that's coming through. I had a little play with that and sent it through, and it looks even sweeter. Some real cool stuff coming through.
I have not used that before.
It's got the
I
best
use it for. Go
best
on.
alias ever. So we shamed him on Twitter into aliasing measure script as why this script no go bruh.
Oh boy.
But that I had, so there were so many things that are timers and like, but they're usually just how long this whole thing takes, right? And then if you have debugging, like maybe you can kind of slam it in that way, and everything else up until I just tried Mateus's module the other day, and everything up until that has been kind of painful or not exactly what I wanted. And whenever I was trying to get my profile to load faster, I used his script, and yeah, I can't recommend that module enough because it's straightforward. It gives you exactly what you want, like line by line, how long something took. It's beautiful, simple, and elegant. I'm glad that you brought that up.
Cool.
And,
Yeah, we'll definitely put that in the show notes.
I was working with an intern last week, and we were going through the code that he'd written, and it was the first time he'd ever written PowerShell code, and it was okay. He did the job, and we were talking about how you can improve it better and better and better. And he was saying, well, why should I worry about doing this quicker? Because it's only like 200 objects. And I'm like, because every little millisecond that you're shaving off, if you're thinking about writing it in this way now, when you're writing it against like Azure AD, where you've got 100,000 objects, you're gonna be able to save a lot more time. You got to really start to think about that there.
So developing good habits right from the start instead of going back and having to fix your bad habits at the
Literally, I had that conversation yesterday with a customer. Oh, it's just 20 milliseconds per iteration. Okay.
Yeah. Well, and realizing how much impact little things. Like I think I saw, correct me if I'm wrong, Chrissy, but I think I saw a post by you about how much output slows down your scripts, like screen
a ton
output.
and progress and output. Yeah. I was very surprised. That's whenever I was counting just those little itty bitty milliseconds. I have since kind of come around to progress. Now I use it whenever, like, because managers love progress, your colleagues love progress. Like, it's just like bloop, 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 bloop. Like Jeffrey Snover loves progress. You'll see if you do a search on Twitter for like 0000 and his little like fake progress bars, like everybody loves it. But what's important is to not do like thousands of little progresses, because that'll slow it down mega. But I had what I like to do is make combo kill scripts where it does like for instance, with Start DBA migration, that does, I don't know, like 36 different things, let's just say. And so if you have just 36 across the board, it's not going to kill your progress, but it'll make it a more enjoyable script to run.
Yeah.
And don't forget RAM when you're writing your PowerShell script.
RAM?
Yeah, RAM. If you save an entire database table into a variable,
Oh, yeah.
and then you set another variable to everything
Yes.
in there but another thing, and then you set another variable in there to everything in the table except the other thing, suddenly you've got that table twice in RAM. And I once had a customer who, like, developers were like, we just can't get this to run on when we're running it as a scheduled as an agent job. And I'm like, why? And then went and had a look, and they were doing that like 70 times, like 70 times.
Yeah.
And what was happening was Windows was just going, I'll have all of the RAM, we'll have all of the RAM, we'll have crunch.
Crunch.
And then it's fighting with SQL Server for it because that's trying to take all the RAM. Oh yeah, I could see how that just.
It was awful. And literally we just stopped all of these assignments and just put everything, into the pipeline. And it was like, oof.
Well, since we've mentioned it a few times, let's talk a little bit about DBA tools. I know you two haven't had a lot of chance to talk about DBA tools before, but maybe
starting opportunity here.
I still go back to SQL Saturday Dublin. I think it was my first SQL Saturday Dublin where you did a joint presentation on DBA tools. It's still probably the best session I've done. Because the way you were bouncing off each other, talking about how the different functions worked. And one thing I really remember about it was demos running. You'd kick off a demo and then talk about what it was doing as the code was running on the screen. So I hadn't seen it done before. I was sitting there going, okay, that's kind of cool.
Awesome.
And judging by the voting of how the sessions went, everyone else thought it was pretty cool as well.
That was one of the best days of my life. It was, yeah, there are like, there are some days that you can wake up, and this was something that I discovered with Rob, because Rob and I did that presentation a number of times. And I'm so happy about Dublin, just because like it's such a cool place. There were so many awesome people there. It offered awards, which I didn't even know. And so I'm glad that I didn't. But it was just one of those days that everything, we were just like high-fiving. It was perfect all along. And then a couple weeks later, we did it in Iceland, and both of us were like, just like kind of low on energy. Yeah. And so it was a big discovery. And we talked about that. I was like, Rob, and he's like, I know. It was, it was just interesting to learn that about working. Nothing had changed other than it was just a different day. So that day in Dublin was a perfect, energetic, just culmination of all these things. And it was definitely, I would say, my favorite presentation I've ever given as well.
I think there was right at the end where they're giving out the awards, and me and you were talking, and something happened, and you went, "Oh, what was that?" And Rob leaned over and, "Chrissy, you just won Best Lightning Tool." You went, "Oh, right." And then
I was like, "This is cool." I thought that was the only award there that day, and so I was about to leave whenever they had announced the best overall. So I'm glad that I stayed just to like chat. Because that would have been terrible if I'd have left.
I think Rob would have accepted the award on your behalf.
Yeah, totally.
Wouldn't have been the same. They wouldn't have been the same. No, we had a lot of fun doing sessions together, because we just managed to bounce off each other and know what's going on. And it gets to the stage when you're comfortable with doing that with somebody else, that you can do things like, Chrissy always goes first. When with that particular presentation, Chrissy always goes first. And then in Slovenia, she went, right, you go in the session. And I'm like, oh, what does Chrissy say here? Like, right, okay, let's go. And it was just really fun that we were able just to like throw these little bombs at each other, like whilst the video of Start DBA migration was running at the PowerShell conference, and Chrissy's explaining what's going on, And I went behind, and there was a big whiteboard, flip chart, and I just lifted it up and I wrote applause underlined it. Then, as Chrissy walked back to the desk, I did that, and then I walked as well, and everybody goes, "Hey!" Chrissy's face was like,
I didn't even know.
you can have some real fun. But the other interesting thing about that is, I think when you find somebody you can give a really great presentation with and you get on really well, is you think, oh, great, I'm really good at doing presentations with other people.
No.
It's just not the same. And there's nothing,
Right, because you're like,
people.
oh, I really like this person, and so this is going to work. But then it turns out indeed that there is a chemistry that you have that, like, we don't necessarily have to work out the exact timing or the exact whatever. We just kind of pick up on that, and just present together. Back in the old days.
Yeah, but also being able to know when the other one's going to speak. Just catch an eye to say, oh yeah, I want to interrupt here. Okay.
Yes.
And having that trust in the other person that is going to be fun. Yeah. It's great. We had fun. I loved it. We will do it again one day when the world is different.
One day.
Yes.
One day sooner than later.
Yeah.
So about DBA tools.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, I totally just railed that.
It's been a great conversation so far, but people are going to expect something about PowerShell. No, but what's been the biggest surprise? Or what surprised you the most about the success of DBA Tools?
I think that I was very surprised that it was a battle initially to get the SQL Server community over to PowerShell. Initially, there was some resistance, but I think that there was a resistance maybe in the general world against PowerShell because maybe the way that it looks, or maybe it was because a lot of times people had seen a development presentation, right? And it's how the meat is made, and the meat is made like it's a messy process, and it's not fun, and it's not that immediate, exciting, instant, like watch out, this progress bar just go right across the screen and then boom, you're done. And so I think that I was very surprised by the initial resistance, but then there was this turning point, and then there was this wide adoption, and it went from resistance to people telling me like, hey, I work at this super duper large company that you completely know, and we're using DBA tools there. Or, hey, we actually require people to know DBA tools before they start as a SQL Server DBA on our team. And that is like, that's the biggest, most amazing thing ever. And I guess I just never expected that would ever be an outcome, that companies that I use their products would be using something that I helped create, and then it would eventually become a requirement for some jobs.
I mean, I get what you mean by the resistance to it in the community. I remember when I was learning it and I was sitting next to a DBA and I was showing him what I was doing. He was, I got this I know this language to query SQL Server. It's called T-SQL. I'm like, yeah,
yes,
all right.
Yes.
And
no, I
then,
totally understand that.
And then you need to look after 10,000 instances. Now what do you do?
Yeah, exactly.
But around that time, I remember saying to you, build something awesome. Build something that works, and people will come to us. Let's not waste our energy fighting. Let's use the energy to build something.
Did you really just say if you build it, they will come?
Yeah. It was more about, I think it was more about let's not use the energy into having the battle of saying, no, Andrew, you're wrong, I'm right, you should use PowerShell, but actually go, hey, Andrew, look at this.
It's
this
amazing.
is cool, isn't it? And then people will take it forward, and that's what happened. It was astonishing.
So this actually,
it was just one day that it just like boom.
This kind of segues into another question. do you think that every DBA needs to be a developer as well now?
Yeah,
No,
I'll let Rob answer that first. I'm curious.
no, absolutely not. Does every DBA need to know DBA tools? Absolutely not. There are some DBAs who do jobs that I couldn't do. They look after a massive database with 4 massive tables, and they sometimes I speak to DBAs whose only job is to look after one table in one database because it's immense and it takes all of their time to keep everything going through. Do they need to be developers? No, I don't think so. Do they need to know DBA tools? Probably not. But if you take it away from that 1%, 2% at the end, Andrew's colleague who uses T-SQL to query SQL Server is writing code. And you will never convince me that code should not be stored in source control. And if making use of source control and then into continuous integration and builds is a development activity, then yeah, sure, you need to be a developer. But if you're writing code, I'm sorry, you're a developer.
So
DBA first, developer second.
Yeah, maybe.
I have a similar, I think that the definition is important. Do I think that every DBA should know PowerShell? No. Do I think that every DBA needs to know at least SQL just a little? Absolutely. I remember whenever I was younger, one of the reasons that I got into SQL Server and I loved it so much was because it did offer that possibility to not just administer this thing, but you could also develop within it. And so that's how I thought that they just went together. If you were a DBA, you had to know some T-SQL at least. And then I saw, if y'all remember SQL Server magazine, they had this cover that says like, you know, a DBA's biggest skill to know now. And I was like, what is it? And then it was development. And I was like, oh, wait, we aren't all T-SQL developers too? And then I started working with other people and they're like, I have no idea what that does. And so I think that it is, and I think that they were missing something, much to an extent that now I'm missing something because I haven't done T-SQL in since 2005, but I have I mostly, whenever I was a DBA, and I'm no longer a DBA, but whenever I was, I was managing SharePoint databases that you can't even modify anyway. So it wasn't up to me to keep up with all of this. But I do acknowledge that that's a bit of skill set that I'm missing now because I haven't kept up with the newest functions and the newest and newest features that are being used.
Yeah, I throw DBAs into 2 buckets, the developer DBA and the systems DBA. And I think the developer DBA is the one working with the data, right? Doing stuff inside of a database, where the systems DBA, I think the majority of us are probably fall into that category, is we're maintaining the platform, right? High availability, backups, configuration, and things like that. And that's where PowerShell is going to shine, is in helping you manage those things at scale, right? It's not going to help you query a bunch of tables faster because you got a language to do that already, right? So using the right tool for the right job. I mean, I use, invoke DBA query all the time, but it's not to go and retrieve data. It's to go retrieve data about the platform so I can do stuff with that, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, I think that I had to write a T-SQL query like a month ago.
It's tough.
It was
Yeah.
painful. I was like, inner join. Wait, hold on. Let me Google this.
Exactly.
So, no, big fun. But yeah, that enablement is what is crazy. Being able to scale across a platform and do it against 10,000 instances. You can't solve that problem. Well, you could probably solve that problem in another language, but T-SQL is not that language.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And I tried to whenever I was younger as well. I had, oh my God, don't look at. So I went and I enabled the ActiveX objects. Don't tell nobody. And then like I would use ActiveX and like SA because I was needing to dig into the operating system. It was all awful. It was all wrong. So imagine when I first learned about the DLLs that run SQL Server Management Studio, which is called SMO. So I loaded up SMO in the PowerShell, and that was the proper way. I wasn't forcing anything. I wasn't breaking like security rules to try to get things done. And so just wanted to throw it out there that I used to write T-SQL that would dig into the OS, and it was the worst, most painful thing in the world.
And I think that's a strong story to tell. Like when I bring DBA tools to customers, so I oftentimes not to sell it like monetarily, but I have to pitch it and be like, "Hey, we're
Right.
going to use this thing. Is it okay? It's an open source tool." But then I tell them that at the core, it's based off SMO, which is and they kind of understand what that is, and it's maintained by Microsoft, and it gives it. I mean, you have your own credibility, but it adds to the credibility that
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
that plumbing underneath is still a Microsoft thing, right?
And all of those resources too. It's not just us doing this, it's Microsoft and us.
Yeah. Microsoft. All right. So you want to grab this one, Mark, or you want to open it up?
Anybody's free to ask some questions.
So you were talking about like Unix and Tickle and all those fun things in the beginning. What's in PowerShell core is a thing, right? In cross-platform, in the arenas that you're working with, but not even within DBAs. Like, what's the adoption of PowerShell core? And for the folks that are listening, like, do they need to pay attention to PowerShell core? Should I still be using 5.1? Like, what's
didn't
the thing that
Microsoft come out and say that Windows PowerShell is done? Like that, there's
feature complete. I think is
No,
what they call
feature
it.
complete.
Yeah, completed.
Yeah. Okay.
Completed is the word. So Windows PowerShell 5.1 is completed. There will be no updates unless something is a security-based thing. Just like there's no updates to Exchange 2012 unless there's a security-based thing. It's the same, exactly the same scenario.
Exchange and security. That's a hot topic.
But it fits together. Because the Exchange team is the reason that the Windows PowerShell is in the Windows operating system.
Absolutely, yeah.
You look back at the story, but anyway, what is the adoption? The adoption is relatively low until you come to developers who are looking to do things with CI/CD because they can use Azure PowerShell in PowerShell core, and they can change things together, and you can get things moving forward there. As a consultant going in, if I'm working generally on my own machine, then I'm using PowerShell 7 all the time, and that's perfectly fine. If I'm writing things for Azure DevOps, then I can write them in PowerShell core. Should people use PowerShell core? Absolutely, they should use PowerShell core. PowerShell core is more, it's more efficient, it's quicker. It adds a few capabilities that you don't have in Windows PowerShell. But best of all, for me, it means that I can pick up a Linux machine, and if need be, I can just install PowerShell core. Bingo. All of my skills I've got, and I can go through and I can interrogate the operating system, and I can work with SQL Server, or I can work against whatever's there using PowerShell, and all the skills I've already got. And it's made me much more comfortable about, I don't care what operating system we're in.
I have a slightly different viewpoint. Because I think that something that I've always loved about presenting with Rob, and something that my skill set has been missing Rob over the past year, because he does stuff that's he does a lot of he introduced me to Pester, right? And he's always progressive, and but for me, I'm always thinking about that backwards compatibility. And because I expect that maybe I'll join some company that they're still running SQL Server 2000, or they're still, running PowerShell 3. And so for me, I always think about like what's pretty much universally available. And the answer to that is PowerShell 5.1. So the way that I develop is that I develop in Windows against PowerShell 5.1 in Windows Terminal because it's beautiful, but that's just the way that I'm looking at it. And then before I publish it out to the gallery, by the way, using PowerShell 7.x, because I'm using GitHub Actions across Mac OS, Linux, Windows, and even on the Pi, I love that like it's also available on Pi. And so that's a very specific, awesome use case, is that you could put PowerShell 7.1 on a Pi. And I do aim for cross compatibility, but mostly I want to make sure that my modules are going to work on the most common denominator. Is that the word? And just work across the board. And so, yeah, I do try to make sure it's 7.1, but it's not my initial focus, in case I accidentally pick up those syntax changes that are far more convenient. It's far more fun to program in PowerShell 7.1. But or whatever it is now, whatever it is, I'm on the newest one, because it's very easy to update too, on the one-off environments. But something that I would like to see before I make the switch, if I ever do, because keep in mind, DBATools still works on version 3, not version 2, because there's a huge security issue that I don't want to encourage people. But I totally forgot where I was going with that. So all in all, 5.1.
So that does lead us to another question. You talked about a couple things like security issues, platform compatibility, like broadest reach. What are some of the things that like you've learned in maintaining open source project at the scale of DBATools? Like what are some of those little things that or big things that you've experienced in maintaining and also growing DBATools as an open source project?
I think that security is very important, and along with that, blogging and talking about it is also very important, because there are some organizations that literally try to turn off PowerShell. And if you could show them in a very succinct manner why it's safer to use PowerShell than it is to literally log in, create these tokens that could be stolen, etc. I think that that's important. So for me, I've always like just enjoyed working with security casually. And I try to get all of the low hanging fruit. So with DBATools, I want it to be as enterprise as possible. So we sign DBATools, we sign DBA checks, so that it can at least like get past that layer. But I've had companies reach out to me and ask about helping them prove their case, and a blog post actually did it. So that was one of the things that I guess was surprising to me about developing. I don't know if that answers your question.
I was going to say, there's a blog post on I think it's on the DBATools site about why leaving the PowerShell ports open for so remotely administered servers is not a security risk compared to something like RDPing to all your boxes and things like that. Because I've definitely forwarded that to people and said, no, give me those ports, please.
Right. That's dbatools.io/secure.
We'll get it in the show notes, definitely.
So at the place where Andrew and I used to work together, I had a scheduled task on all of our SQL instances that as soon as somebody logged on with RDP, would send them an email from me saying, what are you doing on this box?
And
I'm surprised Andrew hasn't brought that up.
I can't remember whether Andrew was still there at the time. But it was just at the same place.
All DBAs like doing that. I used to get, when we had like access denied come through in the error logs, I used to ping developers a message going, "We're watching you."
How do you know this?
Terrifying, right?
Yeah, automation.
So do either of you do any development on a regular basis in the languages other than PowerShell? Do you have a favorite?
I love this question.
Does YAML count?
It does.
No.
Said by somebody that hasn't written a lot of YAML. Sure, YAML counts.
Yeah, I do a lot of things in YAML because YAML fires Azure DevOps. So I always write pipelines in code and keep them alongside the code in source control. I write an amount of Terraform and some Azure CLI. So all still kind of in the Microsoft sphere, but yeah, not. Are they languages? I don't know. Am I still developing? Definitely.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like to hear that answer because a lot of people will argue things like CSS isn't a language or HTML isn't a language, but
Does it make a computer do something?
exactly.
Right.
Right.
So Data Saturdays, datasaturdays.com is
Man,
is running on Jekyll, and it's all on GitHub pages. So we fired it up, and creating a new event meant somebody going and copy and pasting stuff and then putting in the right values. And of course, we all know how copy and pasting goes. So I set about one day going, I'm not having this. We're going to make this better. So now an event organizer will create a PR with 2 files. The files have the data in of the things that they need, the description, the speaker call for speakers link, the schedule API from Sessionize once they've done it, and then they submit the PR. If it's all okay, away it goes and off it builds. So that was my latest sort of new language and new learning, and that was certainly a battle. But now, hands off, go create as a PR with these 2 text files, and we will build your event site. So
very cool. I hadn't read a lot about that.
I love
I didn't know you guys were using Jekyll. That's cool. That's a fantastic platform. I'm not a huge Ruby fan, and I don't like installing it for local development. But
and Andrew can help with that. He knows a lot about containers.
well, no, that's exactly it. So the 8KB website is the same.
Yeah, you got me just.
Amazon.
Yeah, Mark went. Yeah, go and install Jekyll and we'll sort out the 8KB site, Andrew. And I went, okay, Mark. Okay, I'll go do that right now. No problem.
I actually really
So I looked
loved.
at.
Go on.
Sorry, Chrissy. I looked at installing Jekyll and went, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So I've got 2 containers, one for Data Saturdays and one for the Data Saturdays blog, depending on which, because one uses a remote theme. So I just pull down a pull request in VS Code, check it out, spin up the container. Yeah, it looks fine. Boof, go. Because I saw that you need to install this version of Ruby with this version of Jekyll, and you need to have that. But if you don't, then you've got this, and then you try and install it, and mayhem. And I'm like, I'm just not doing that.
Yeah.
And these
for
are
anyone
the
who's
skill
actually
sets
watching
that
the
I
YouTube
miss out
video,
on.
sorry.
Oh, so go on. Sorry.
So for anyone watching the YouTube video and wondered why I had to disappear off then, because every time we record Mixed Extents, it's the one time that's the 1 hour of the week where I can't physically leave my computer, is when things like my landlord turns up or my deliveries turn up. And I've been waiting for this delivery since last Friday, and it's finally turned up, and it's my new keyboard. So I'm very, very happy with that. That's why that's suddenly why it's my new 40% keyboard. So if I can't type from now on, that's why.
Is it split in half? Looks like that.
No, I thought about one of those, but then I thought once I get used to using that, I'll never be able to type on a proper keyboard ever again. So
no, it's just missing most of the keys.
It's literally just got the letters on it. Yeah.
He's throwing back
keyboard.
like 40 years on that one, right?
Yeah.
So
it's got function keys. It'll be fine.
Arrow keys are for newbies, right?
Sounds like an Apple keyboard.
Oh, now you've just tainted it for me.
Anytime.
You don't need that many keys.
I do like what Rob said. First of all, that's the type of skill set that I miss out on, because since we're not hanging out, he'll be like, Chrissy, come check out Jekyll. And I'll be like, it was on my agenda. And you just never get around to stuff. And yeah, when you go to conferences, you get around to stuff because all your friends are like, come check it out. But I really love what he highlighted, that it's not just about PowerShell, because he talked about Jekyll, and for me, I am getting involved in something called Ansible. And in addition, I have been wanting to explore other programming languages, and it kind of breaks my heart in a way, because I love PowerShell so deeply that I just don't know if I can like anything else. But maybe if I just see it as a tool, the way that I use Jekyll, or the way that I love GitHub Actions. But I was exploring which one am I going to love the way that I love PowerShell. The ones on the agenda are Python. I think maybe I could love it.
Please do.
Uh,
Yeah.
Go, which is really
Go.
cool because it makes beautiful command line tools, and then it does web stuff, I think. And then also, then the other one was TypeScript, that I would finally, it would enable me to make Chrome extensions, and it would enable me to make VS Code extensions,
Mhm.
and pretty much anything that's written in Electron. So those are things that are on my agenda, but I haven't yet got around to. So Mark, I was happy to hear that you should have called you Mike. Damn it. So Mark, I was happy to hear that you're a Python developer, and you seem to really love it in a way that I also want to love other things in addition to PowerShell.
Yeah, so if I love writing stuff in PowerShell because you can prototype stuff really fast because it's just a really simple language. So I'll usually start a lot of stuff in PowerShell, and then if I need it to go faster and I just can't get it done with PowerShell, that's when I switch over to Python.
Wow.
Which some people would probably kind of balk at as well, because Python's
Am
not
I the only
like
one
a-
who doesn't like Python? Oh, I'm sorry. You've
You
got
are,
version
man. It's a
3.
beautiful language.
You've got version 3.6 installed. This requires 3.4.
Oh,
I'm going to
stop,
fall over.
stop. But
I think-
it is a valid point. It's a valid point.
Python gives you Jupyter notebooks, though, Andrew.
Oh yeah, some notebooks.
True.
But yeah, if I needed to go faster than PowerShell, I'll use Python.
And the MS SQL CLI is in Python as well.
Yeah.
So.
And if I
Oh,
needed
is
to go
it? Wait, it
faster
was
than
written
that,
in-
Go is the language.
Wow. I didn't realize it was written in Python. That's really cool then. Is
It
that what
seems
you
like there's
said?
a lot of tools like that are written in Python nowadays.
Yeah.
But then .NET Interactive notebooks, Andrew, you don't need Python for. But you do need the .NET SDK.
Yes. I've got both. Rob very generously gave me the scripts to generate both sets of notebooks for the SQL Server Containers guide, which are up on GitHub. So they're all there. People, those are awesome. To be fair, Rob, people go, because you have the wiki and you have all the code, but then if you combine the wiki with the code, and people just sit there going, "Oh yeah, that's cool." Running, spinning up their containers and working through everything. It's fantastic. So really chuffed with that. Thank you.
That's good. The ADS notebook module, Chrissy, can take an input from a GitHub wiki and turn it, as long as it's formatted correctly, turn it into either a .NET or a not .NET notebook. So you've got your text and then the code, so people can follow along.
Cool. And then you could actually run like some C# code in your notebook.
Okay, so that's all PowerShell, which is basically command line. So for Andrews, it's a lot of Docker stuff. If you want to run C# or mixed languages, then you need .NET Interactive notebooks, but not the .NET Interactive notebooks that are in Jupyter notebooks. Yeah, it's one of those stories. But to be fair, I think what's going to happen is that this lot of .NET Interactive notebooks are going to become the gold standard moving forward.
De facto standard.
Yeah, because
Awesome.
you can run C#, F#, HTML, PowerShell Core, and I think other things will be coming at some point as well. But you can have different ones in different blocks, so you can mix and match languages.
I can't wait for that.
Anti-SQL as well.
How long until that's released?
It's out.
That's out. But I thought that y'all said it was going there. Does it still need to be developed more?
Everything will keep going forward. Those things work now. I literally at a client writing PowerShell notebooks in the new .NET Interactive for them.
Awesome. I'll check it out. Thank you so much.
All right.
Okay.
I've got another question related to PowerShell, just because I'm interested to know what the answer is going to be here. But what do you hate about PowerShell? There has to be something.
Scoping.
Man, that's negative.
I know it is. It's kind of a negative question, but it's I'm interested to know.
Scopes drive me absolutely bonkers. I cannot get my head around what level a thing is, a variable is at, or it just drives me mad. And it's an understanding thing, and I've had 1,000 people explain it to me and sit me down and try and work it through. And it's one of those things, I just can't get it.
Sounds like
Yeah,
me
I
and encryption in
remember
SQL
struggling.
Server. It's been explained to me.
Your SMKs and your DMKs, right?
Yeah.
I'm so glad it's not just me, Prusky.
No,
It's not.
well, Pablo on our team's like he's kind of the expert at it, and every time we have an issue with it, and I go and I'll explain this to me, you just feel him going, oh,
Ah. The thing that I hate, is part of a bigger problem that I hate, and it's that I don't feel like PowerShell is supported in the docs as much as it should be, right? So this isn't a problem with the language, but it's a problem with the adoption of the language. Because sort of like, I don't know how it is for across the world, but growing up in America, whenever you had an election, everybody would have their signs in the yards, right? And they would be like, Buddy Romer for governor. And if everybody says Buddy Romer for governor, and then you have this little one sign, who's probably going to win? People are going to know Buddy Romer for governor. They're going to look up who Buddy Romer is. It's going to entice them. And then whenever you go to the docs and you see PowerShell never listed, right? Like Python will be there, like F#, J#, every like
DB
Java, everything but PowerShell, then who's going to know about us? Who's going to see this easy? And PowerShell is built into your computer. It's built into your Windows. And if you're running Linux, you can go and get it. That isn't true for the rest, that you have to install all of these binaries and all of these dependencies. And so it just breaks my heart that there's no docs and therefore no advertisement of PowerShell. And if I'm honest, it's one of the reasons that I'm looking to learn another language, because if PowerShell isn't being documented and it isn't being put forth, then where does that leave us? Where's it gonna go? And so, yes, Beard, give me some hope, Beard.
No, I'm gonna pile on, because my scoping answer is for the thing that leaves me banging my head on the desk when stuff doesn't work. But the thing that annoys me about the PowerShell world is consistency, or rather inconsistency, in that the 5 of us on this call can write better functions than some that are provided for us
Yes.
from some programs.
I don't know. You haven't seen Anthony's functions, man.
Not very nice.
And I mean, it sounds harsh, but it's true. We've got PowerShell best practice guidelines that have been in place and discussed and everything for years. We have, naming conventions. We have ways of doing things. And if you go and look at how the modules that are provided to you work, they don't obey the pipeline. They use different parameter names for the same thing within the module. It's stuff like that drives me.
Please edit your
nuts.
PSM1 file. I don't know if you saw that, but there was an Azure module that literally said, please edit your PSM1 file and put in your token. And it was official. And it's stuff like that I'm like, well, gonna get a container, install Python, and get going from there, because my God.
Because you can guarantee, people who are listening, you can guarantee that I have had the conversation with people within Microsoft about this, both people in the PowerShell team and people in other teams, and just work together and make this work. Come on, people are using this, and I think this is where. Sorry, Anthony, Andrew, what's your name?
Oh my God, Mike.
Mike, yeah. Sorry, Mike. I think the other part of that is that it was one of the surprising things about DBA Tools was the fact that the SQL Server module is not rated high enough within Microsoft to get a lot of developer input, which is fair enough. But DBA Tools came along, all of these wonderful people built this great thing, and loads of people are using it. So the need was there, but it just hadn't surfaced and bubbled up.
Right. And I thought that the SQL Server module was an exception. And I thought that, oh, well, we just kind of helped fix that world. So clearly, like, all of this is just going to continue on in all the other worlds. But then the Azure world is like, oh my God, I'd rather use the CLI. And so then I'm like, no, this can't be. It is, we were talking about 2016. And that's been 5 years. So we've had 5 years and we still have the same problems. And so at what point? But
hey,
wow.
PowerShell's awesome and everybody should use it.
Yeah,
don't even publish this.
We can't finish the show on that.
We'll finish. We'll finish the show. We have a good question last, but you're right though. Like, all of the things that you described, you attack those problems as DBA Tools right away. Standardization of parameters, signing of the project. Like, those are big deal issues to making the code usable over time. And you just touched on it a second ago, Chrissy. What am I going to learn to work in Azure? PowerShell or Azure CLI? Where am I going to invest my time? I write a lot of training material. What do I invest my time in? Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so
Anthony's coming from a bitter place, because didn't you release a Pluralsight course, and then 2 weeks later they changed all the Azure module?
Yeah. All right, I'll go here. All right, so that was the.
You had to step back for a second for that.
Yeah, the Azure RM module getting deprecated for the AZ module 2 weeks after I published the course on how to deploy virtual machines in Azure with PowerShell.
Come on, it's kind of funny now.
Yeah, it is funny now.
It's not funny now.
Right.
But here's the thing. When I write, so last project was writing a lot of automation for infrastructure. Some of it in Azure, all in Azure, some of it PaaS, some of it IaaS. And I did a lot of it in Terraform. And what I couldn't do in Terraform, I did in Azure PowerShell, except when I couldn't do it in Azure PowerShell, I do it in AZ CLI. And I think, right, well, maybe I should just do it all in AZ CLI. And like, no, I can't do it all in AZ CLI. So this story is just very complicated. And for folks like us who like the challenge of the problem, who like working through and going through, I love it. I mean, it drives me bonkers at times, but I love solving that problem. How did you get to do this? Yeah, well, I had to do this in PowerShell and this in AZ CLI and all the rest of it in Terraform, and I did it like this. And then, but you can't put it all the same task. It's got to be like that. That sort of stuff. I enjoy doing it. But what I've probably learned in the last 5 years is that a whole bundle of other people, they just want it easy. And I've been saying for years,
I think that they want it to be accessible. Yeah. And what's happening is that it becomes inaccessible when you have to spend all of that time figuring out, since there's not a consistent usage, there's not a consistent, reliable solution such as PowerShell and all of its modules. I mean, it feels to me, and I could be wrong, but it seems like the Python world really got it figured out. Like, people have all of the modules that they need and they're easy to get. I don't know. I know that it's hard to install and that you do have version issues, but overall, it seems like there is a consistent message and a consistent community. Maybe
Every
I'm
time
wrong.
I-
Maybe grass is greener.
Yeah, every time I try and do something with Python, which isn't very often, it's always a version incompatibility or a package incompatibility, or you've installed this in the wrong order. Now try and undo what you've done to get it to go back, and you're diving down another bundle of Google pain.
Yeah.
I think
All
it's
right. So I guess we're back to Go TypeScript. Where we at now, fellas?
Go is good. No, I totally agree with that about Python. I guess where it shines is fresh development. Like if you're the developer and you're writing this thing, and if you can then containerize that thing, it's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Is containerizing PowerShell our answer?
certainly works.
You could,
You
yeah,
can-
yeah.
Like as a, I don't know. I'm like, oh, no, not really. Because we do have the ecosystem that already works. Like we have install module and it's really nice.
Yeah.
And we don't have all of these version conflicts and everything just works. And they figured it out really, really well. So it's not that containerization problem. It's a bigger support problem.
Could containerization help people to have their environment set up to use DBA tools? Absolutely. You absolutely could make sure you've got everything that you need. Maybe not just DBA tools, but import Excel, PS framework, DBA check.
Right. Yeah.
Having all of this together in a container where you got it controlled with these versions, and then all of these scripts are going to work. Yeah, I can see how that could be beneficial.
Yeah, because one of the challenges that I've had in larger environments is someone updating DBA tools without telling me. And next thing you know, something boom goes bump in the night and doesn't work properly anymore.
That should not happen.
Right.
Hold on. My heater is too hot. My heated blanket. Give me a second. Okay. That shouldn't happen so much anymore. Like we went from 0.9
this was
to
earlier
whatever. And after that, yeah. So, and we did offer a script to kind of fix as much as we could. But that was, so since 2019, that shouldn't be as much of a problem, but you highlight that consistency is very important and things not breaking is very important. And PowerShell made that as easy as possible. And it's such a good platform and I love it. And I wish, and I hope that I'll be programming in PowerShell the rest of my life.
Yeah,
I'm
after all
sure
of
the
that-
1.0 release, I still have my sticker from grilling on my laptop.
Oh yeah, same here.
Yeah, one thing
Prettiest.
after all of that being said, I agree with everything that was said, and I still love developing stuff in PowerShell. So
Yeah.
Oh, it's
don't be
still
scared.
my go-to.
It's a
Yeah,
great
absolutely.
language.
Like I don't
Agreed.
even like try to solve problems in SSMS anymore. Like I just
No.
go to VS Code and start writing the code to do
And
it.
kind of like Chrissy, I pretty much forgot how to write T-SQL at this point.
All right.
Totally. Thank goodness.
Yeah,
It-
write a
it's-
cursor for each object. Get out of here.
This morning I was creating a color-coded Excel sheet showing where role assignments in an entire Azure subscription don't match the rules, and that being able to do that sort of thing is just fantastic. Don't get me wrong. I love using PowerShell to solve problems for me and for my clients. I hate that it's not easy for other people. That's the point. It's the other beauty is that if you learn PowerShell, you can do anything. Because
On the computer you've got nothing else. Even ISE is built in. If you want to use it, I only use VS Code. But just to say, it's amazing. I love natively available things, and I know no matter how restrictive of a network I'm on, PowerShell will be available there. I don't have to I wouldn't even know how to install Python on a restricted, super secure network. It seems like it would be a lot of hell. And I want it's there. And I honestly, you had asked Mark about like what other things. I'm learning Ansible, and even though PowerShell's documentation could be better and PowerShell's promotion could be better, I still plan to develop in it the rest of my life and actually marry Ansible and PowerShell And I spent a lot of time talking to Adil from Chocolatey just recently. I think that it's going to solve a lot of my problems, and I'm really excited. That's the next project that I'll be working on.
Cool.
All right. Well, we're gonna wrap up here with a final question.
Thanks, Matthew.
Hey, Matthew.
If you no, see, the hosts get the names wrong. Come on. No.
Now you've told me. That's it.
Yeah. So if you could have one feature in SQL Server or in PowerShell implemented tomorrow, what would that feature be, and how would it help you, or how would it help the community?
Docs. Give me some docs. Just give me all of the docs on every single page and consistency. I think we need, one more thing.
Oh yeah, go.
Stability within the VS Code extension. So I don't
Yes.
want any more features. I don't care. I could just never
Yes.
have another feature again. Give me stability. Give me docs. Give
If they
me
get rid of that,
support.
if they get rid of that terminal in the PowerShell extension for VS Code, I might install it again. Don't see the point of it at all.
I tried to disable it, and then tabbing, what's it called? Code formatting didn't work anymore or something like that. And so that's what it's there for. That's the only thing that I use it for.
And debugging.
And debugging, which I don't use it for.
Right host is fine.
Ouch.
Hope to work.
Ouch. You said it a couple times.
Well, Rob, what about you?
The thing that bit me recently that I would love to have changed is being able to run the PowerShell modules that I would like in a managed instance as an agent job.
Ooh.
Bringing both
So-
worlds together.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
you know,
good.
Here is your challenge. We need to. I built a whole framework of stuff, and on-prem it all runs using PowerShell scripts, DBATools.io/agent fixes all my problems. No worries, we can go ahead and do stuff, and it's all running against Azure. Brilliant. Now we're migrating it into managed instance. Great. We can now run it in. Oh, okay.
Not quite.
But
Now
what's
I
the
can't.
missing element? Is that there's no command exec subsystem or no ability to install a module? What's the thing that's missing?
That's the problem. So to run an agent job that's running PowerShell,
Mhm.
our long and varied experience. Look how grey this beard is, right? The way to run PowerShell in an agent job, DBATools.io/agent. That's the way that works. All other ways will cause you pain and make your beard go grey. Okay, so that works fine. You need to have the PowerShell file on the file system. Great. Managed instance, you're not allowed to access the file system. And you need to then install DBA Tools because we're doing SQL Server stuff. Yep, you're not allowed to have, you've got no way of adding extra modules. So that if that could have been changed, that would have made my life much easier.
Interesting.
So in addition, real quick, to dbatools.io/agent, there's also dbatools.io/book. Chapters 17, 18, and 19 are all dedicated to SQL Server Agent.
We'll definitely have that in the show notes. Mark, did you get that? 16, 17, 18? No, 17, 18, 19. 20, 21,
17,
22.
18, 17, 18,
Yeah.
19
Oh, I got
currently.
I'm a proud owner of the book, and I strongly recommend it because of the practical examples. It's basically, let's do some stuff together, and then Rob and Chrissy show you how to do that stuff together, and it's
Very cool.
super fantastic. Real
Thank you
world
so
problems
much.
in there.
Thank you.
All right. Well, on that note, then I guess we'll call this finished. So thanks everyone who will listen in the future since this is not live streamed. And thank you, Chrissy and Rob, for joining us today.
I've had a blast. Thank you so much for the invite.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. It's like Windows PowerShell 5.1. It's complete.
Thanks,
Oh,
both.
Bye.
Even though you can't hear that in your thing, and you're seeing on your waveform.
Out of all the times for things to turn up, I
I
mean,
know.
really,